to another video. In this video, I'm going to be discussing what is faith and what does faith represent. In my understanding of faith, I began to realize that faith stems from one particular belief, which is the fundamental value regarding the person's ability to hold not just fear but guilt upon themselves so that the world around them may not experience it themselves. But if you do not hold it upon yourself, then the world around you experiences the feeling of guilt and fear within themselves. Which brings the notion of a savior. And in the notion of a savior, we then begin to see a particular character arc, where you begin to see that faith isn't just a pillar to uphold your spirit, but it is also a measure of your character. Which means, as a measure of your character, your particular faith now represents this particular value. And the faith understood of man, which is a faith created around the experience of man, we then see that the true meaning around the faith of man is, in order for the world to not experience fear or guilt, you hold it upon yourself. And in order for yourself to not feel guilt or fear, you would then put it to the rest of the world. The question of the measure now is, at which rate are you creating this exchange? Because in the rate of the exchange is also the potential rate of the character. In the hero, you would see that the hero is able to take on a higher level of this measure. Whereas now we see side characters and the tales of the hero being the main character. We then see in the analysis of any story told that in the archetype of the side character, we see a much lower potential rate at which faith is spent. In the understanding of the hero, you see the attitude of what would be known as the winner mentality. And what that essentially means is it is an individual that is a winner based on the fact that they are not afraid to lose. Which now, when you look at the ability of generating yourself as a main character in your life, you would then realize that in the understanding of the faith of man, if you are not afraid to lose this faith, you get pretty close to the end. Which means faith has a very deeply rooted experience in the heart of man. Because in the heart of man is where you feel this particular faith is felt. And in the experience of man, we then see the polar opposite. Which in the faith of woman, as a man, I choose not to touch that one. I cannot create a faith for woman. I can create a faith she may understand based on the perspective of man. But in the idea of the faith of woman, as a man, I don't have a right to tell woman what to do. And that is not a stab or a jab at woman in this particular statement. That is purely the notion of the faith You can either have a happy woman or you can be right as a man. And in the idea of the happy woman is where you find the faith of woman, because in the idea of man being righteous or being right, you then see that this faith is rooted in that particular righteous experience. But in the understanding of the opposite, which is the happiness of the woman, which a happy wife means happy family all of a sudden. And in leaving that particular statement regarding the family, returning to the faith of man, in return or the exchange for family, you would then see the true depth behind the man's faith, which is regarding the family, which is the rate the man then slows down the way he spends or disperses his guilt and fear. And in doing so, he does so to prevent his family from feeling that fear or guilt. He holds it upon himself and he hones upon it. He learns to conquer that fear and guilt, creating that character arc where the man becomes the main character, he who pushes the future of the family forward. But now we must also look at it from the perspective of the female faith, which to this day, now that we have entered the era of woman, we have yet to also have seen a faith explained by woman, which could take a few thousand years at this particular rate in order for it to come into play, just as the faith of man. Now, the faith in itself is derived from the initial meaning of faith, which at its core value, faith is derived in the argument of man, that faith is derived from the ability to hold and not disperse guilt or fear upon the rest of the world. You would hold it upon yourself so the world may not experience it. In the argument of man, this is where the fundamental beginning of all faith stems from. And in the understanding of that particular notion, if the ability to withhold the fear and guilt now stems the faith that emits the happiness of the woman, which in my understanding, the true faith of a happiness is the faith of the woman. A woman is meant to be happy. It is the role of the woman to be of a happier nature when you look between the partners of man and woman. And traditional familial values, which were possibly a societal construct. But in understanding these societal constructs, in the idea that if man and woman naturally fall together and create these particular replicative patterns in their own natural behavior towards one another, which is the assimilation of their own sexual roles within familial values, if we can say that that is a societal construct, but in the meantime, 72 plus new sexual orientations are a naturally occurring factor, but are not a societal construct, I would argue is a paradox. And in the understanding of this paradox, without displacing anybody's orientation, because it all relates back to the orientation in itself. You see, whether you are oriented straight, gay, or lesbian, at the core fundamental value of your own moral compass is where you find faith, which in the core value of the fundamental moral compass known as your faith is where you find the notion behind faith, whether you are gay, straight, or lesbian, or trans, on and on and on. At the core fundamental value, the measure of your character is your faith, which is your ability to hold fear and guilt upon yourself in order to prevent others around you from feeling fear or guilt, because you yourself are holding on to it so they may not experience it. And that is the beginning of all eminent relationships. The sacrifice of the 50-50. If I give too much fear to my partner, they might see that as a negative aspect. If I give not enough fear to my partner, they might also see that as a negative aspect. But fear creates a slightly thrilling experience. It is fresh. It is a new, exciting experience. Whereas in the guilt, you feel the depression of the person's internal state. And so now imagine in the experience of fear and guilt, guilt is actually an emotion eminent from an opposing form of love. It is an experience or a feeling experienced and felt due to an opposing form of love seeking to guide you. And in the experience of guilt is a emotion derived as a result of love. If I love someone too much, they will retract in their own guilt, thinking, how is it that that person is that interested? It is slightly odd at that particular point, because in understanding a 50-50 rule, in understanding my dispersing, if I hold upon myself, the world doesn't experience it. But if the world doesn't experience it, I hold upon myself. And in that particular notion, you then see that in the beginning portions of relationships, where do we see the first initial move? At the moment the man initiates a dispersing, creating a attraction. But in the attraction, you see the happiness of the woman all of a sudden begin. And in understanding a happy relationship, you as a man want to maintain that happiness at all costs, if you get what I'm saying. Because if you do not keep that happiness at all costs, you are not going to be happy as a result. Sounds mind-blowing. Wow. It is that simple. You are either right and righteous, or you have a happy partner. Because ultimately that is the message that has been left behind the world. In this present day and age, we are actively seeing that after we have exited the era of man, we are now seeing that beyond the era of man and the entrance to the era of woman, woman is now saying to man, you don't have a right to talk anymore. Oddly enough, that is what woman is now saying, because look at the movements we are telling straight men. Don't talk. Don't express. Because they have gotten to a point now where it is essentially that particular fundamental value. If the man is happy, the woman is not. But if the woman is happy, then the man is. And in the understanding of the righteous to happy, we see the fundamental element we currently see in the relationship model of society, which is that based on the negative emotion a man experiences, known as holding fear and guilt, he then sees a happiness in his wife or partner, which results in the happiness of his children. And then you might realize that this essentially is what is the crucifixion of man. It is that particular purpose of man in the universe, to be the protector and provider from which the rest may emanate from. But in order to do so, you must first create the faith and depth around the man so that he may achieve the mentality to be able to withstand that particular faith known as a suffering. And in the suffering, you are then able to find your salvation in your rebirth. And in the rebirth, what do you think a rebirth means? Do you think it means a metaphysical mental process such as an ego death? Or do you think it means an actual physical death where you make the arc and accept this particular fate to be reborn stronger than before, to be able to withhold that particular weight of your cross as a man? In our understanding between man and woman, men, out of every third man experiences what is known as depression, which is the inability to then self-express. You become still, you become depressed. And the stiller you are as a man, the more you see your family dance before you. In the sacrifice of man is where you see the beauty stem from the story of Job now, where he had everything taken from him, and then was given everything back 10 times fold after he had regained his faith. And as a man, you now see the story of Job, also known as the story of Job, your purpose, which is the work you must do in order for you to create this transition. In your early life, you are given everything, you have everything. Then you enter the middle portion of life where you arrive and must now have everything taken away from you, because you must now generate it for yourself. but in the self-pity of the material aspect, or the physical death, you wish, is the misunderstanding. Because in the story of Job is the metaphysical process where in his mental reflection through the support of his friends analyzing his situation for him, Job eventually realized the true nature of it all, which is stated in the moment God explains or gives the answer to Job, which is in the question itself. When Job asks, why did this happen to me? And God responds with, these two beasts could end you at any particular time, but they won't, which is what makes them inherently good. And in that notion, you understand now the dispersing aspect of the purpose of the faith. In the depth of the faith of man, in the sacrifice of the purpose, he then becomes as one of those beasts. And upon it becoming one of those beasts, which is that beast could end you at any particular time, but it doesn't, which means it is inherently good. And that is the understanding of all life forms on earth, which we were able to then create closer relationships with these animal forms, because we could see some were out to kill us and some were out not to kill us. And based on this relationship, in understanding the animal, we can then understand the human, which, if an individual is going around dispersing guilt or fear, is that individual inherently good? But if an individual holds that fear and guilt upon themselves, is that individual inherently good? And we begin now the measure of the character, the measure of the faith of the character, which is their ability to generate a moral compass. And the beauty of faith is the understanding aspect of things, which means now as a religious person, you might understand in order for you to survive, you must do what is necessary, which means forget everybody aside for a second and think to the center of the experience of your life, which happens to be, drumroll, you are the center of your experience of life as an individual, which at this particular state, we are seeing that we are choosing not to pursue wanting a main character-like lifestyle. And so we see the dehumanization within the human existence in our present day and age. And in this particular analysis is based on the measure of the character known as society. It's not working, it's not doing its purpose, it's not doing its job of pursuing the faith to uphold the spirit in order for you as an individual to change the world around you. Not individually, but now collectively. There's a famous joke which is regarding a mental psych ward where in Israel is every Return of Messiah complex. And in these Messiah complexes, you would then see the return of 100 Jesuses essentially within a psych ward. And they're all arguing regarding who's Jesus. I am Jesus. No, I forgive you. I am Jesus. No, I forgive thee. I am Jesus. And now you see in this particular story is a funny notion, which begs the question, if we come to understand the fundamental truth behind faith, how many Christs or Christ-like personalities would arise the moment we create a new, further, better understanding of faith? I'll leave that to you to reflect on for now. Thank you.